Do you find yourself having really negative thoughts?
Do you tend to worry a lot, playing the what-if game and imagining all kinds of terrible outcomes?
In this video, we're going to talk about how we can take control of our own thoughts, and I'm going to give you some strategies for doing so.
Now, first off, where does worry come from? Why do we worry? Well, there's a lot of different possibilities.
One possibility is our exposure to our parents' way of thinking or feeling. We're learning how to be in the world by observing our parents. Whether they actually say anything or it's through their body language, if we have a parent who's constantly giving us the message that the world is unsafe, we take that message in and it informs our own thinking. We eventually pick up where they left off. Another possibility is that it's adaptive, that worry or negative thinking actually keeps us safe. Think about it. We are the descendants of anxious people. For example, when our caveman ancestors had to find a place to live, being able to consider worst-case scenarios, doing that what-if thinking kept them safe. Our caveman ancestors who couldn't think ahead to what could possibly occur didn't survive.
Another theory is that worry gives us a way to avoid looking at deeper issues. If we have unprocessed emotion or trauma that we've never dealt with, that we don't really want to look at, worry can be a great distraction. As long as I'm worrying about why my kids haven't called or what's going to happen tomorrow at work, I don't have time to look at those other issues. And worrying about the family or work can feel much more manageable than dealing with all of that stuff from the past. This also gives us a false sense of control. Worry can feel productive, like we're chewing on something important. It's natural for us to want to feel in control, and if there are areas in our lives that we don't have a sense of control over, past or present, then worry can make us feel like we're doing something useful.
Regardless of what's responsible for our negative thoughts, thinking negatively can have some serious downsides. First off, negative thinking interferes with being in the present moment. You can be somewhere perfectly safe, having a great time, and suddenly you start thinking a negative thought. And despite the fact that you're safe, that negative thought totally ruins your good time. Negative thinking could also interfere with you pursuing opportunities. Maybe there's something you'd very much like to be able to do, but because you imagine worst-case scenarios or have a critical inner voice, you talk yourself out of it. You don't go after the things you really want. Your life could go in a completely different direction because of the things you talk yourself into or out of. And not only that, but negative thinking can be really taxing on the body. Let me explain.
Every thought that we think creates a corresponding chemical cascade within our bodies. Imagine that you are outside enjoying a summer barbecue, and suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, you thought you saw a snake. As a result of that thought, you would begin to have all kinds of physiological, emotional, and psychological responses. Your heart would start to beat more quickly, your mouth would go dry, and you'd begin to sweat. You'd be entering into a fight-flight response, preparing to flee from the backyard or protect yourself against the snake. If you then realized that what you saw was not a snake at all, but rather a garden hose, all of those initial reactions would go away. You might even laugh at yourself for thinking it was a snake in the first place, and now you're releasing serotonin, endorphins, all the feel-good hormones. And the point is, it doesn't matter if there was a snake there or not. All of those reactions, good and bad, were created by your own thoughts.
And so let's look at some strategies for changing our thinking. This first strategy involves challenging the thought and trying on some different perspective. Sometimes people think we have to just think the first thought that comes to mind, but we don't. There may be thoughts that pop into our minds, but we get to decide how much time we spend with them, or if we move on to a different perspective. We can recognize that just because we had a thought, that doesn't mean it's true. And we can choose to walk around a situation and look at it from some different angles to see if there's another possible way of looking at it. It's not the events in our lives that cause us our problems, it's the meaning we attach to them. It's what we tell ourselves about them. If we could learn to tell ourselves something different, we would save ourselves a lot of suffering. Let me give you an example.
Let's say Bob loses a job and he thinks to himself, oh my gosh, how could I let this happen? I'm such a loser. I'm going to end up on the street. I'm not going to have enough money to pay my bills. This is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. With that way of thinking, Bob is going to feel defeated and deflated and have no energy for changing his situation.
Or Bob could catch himself and choose to think about this from a different angle. He could say to himself, all right, this isn't what I expected, but I've got a good resume. I know if I put the word out, if I do some networking, if I do some research, I'll find another job. This is just a little glitch. I'll be back on my feet soon enough.
With that way of thinking, he's going to have way more energy and enthusiasm for changing his situation.
Or he could entertain another perspective entirely. He could tell himself, hey, what if this is a good thing? What if this is happening for me instead of to me?
Maybe this is an opportunity to make more money, to travel, to learn some new skills or meet some interesting people. Maybe this is really a blessing in disguise. With this way of thinking about it, Bob is going to have way more energy and enthusiasm to change his situation. It can require effort in the beginning to think differently because we have a default way of thinking, a way we're used to thinking. However, as we practice introducing a new thought, we begin to develop and then strengthen a new neural pathway in the brain for thinking in this new way. And eventually that new way of thinking becomes the new default and it no longer requires so much effort. So how can you go about changing your thoughts? Here are some questions you can ask yourself. Not every question is applicable to every situation, but these are some places where you could start. When a worry thought comes up, you could ask yourself, what else could this mean? Or what is another possibility here? Remember, just because we have a thought doesn't mean it's true. Maybe your coffee date didn't stand you up. Maybe they had to stop for gas or simply lost track of time running errands. We often make assumptions about what something means. One way to test those assumptions is to simply ask the other person. Another question you can ask yourself to change your thinking is, what if this were happening for me instead of to me? Or how could this situation help me to grow or evolve in some way? Our biggest challenges are often our greatest teachers. Maybe something that appears negative in your life is really an opportunity to grow, to develop some new skills, to get creative, or discover some strengths that you never knew you had. Another question you can ask yourself to look at things differently is, if I were in a great mood, how would I look at this situation? Our mood can color our perception. Have you ever noticed, for example, that when you're falling in love, everything just seems brighter and more beautiful? When we are down or depressed for whatever reason, that can color how we look at things. So either wait until you're in a better mood before you make decisions or analyze a situation, or do things to put yourself in a better mood. Get some exercise, engage in enjoyable hobbies, pay attention to your self-care. Make sure you get good sleep or talk it through with a therapist or a friend. The next strategy we're going to look at is learning to let go of that which you cannot control. We can spend a lot of time worrying about things that we have absolutely no ability to influence. We cannot control other people's thoughts or behavior or how happy they are. We can't control natural disasters, the weather, the traffic, or the past. Any time spent trying to do so is a misuse of our imagination and keeps us away from using our energy on things we can do something about. And so step number 1 is to discern whether the thing you're worried about is actually within your ability to control or not. If it is within your ability to control, move on to finding solutions instead of worrying about it. If it's not within your ability to control, find some way to let it go. Even finding a symbolic way will do you a lot of good. Here's one way to remind yourself to let things go. Not my circus, not my monkey. Whenever you find yourself worrying about a person or situation that really has nothing to do with you, just remind yourself, not my circus, not my monkey, and notice how easily you can let it go. Another way to remind yourself to let things go is to use the helium balloon analogy. Imagine anything that's been worrying you being like a helium balloon and you're holding on to the string. Imagine just letting go of that string and letting that thing that's been on your mind just float away. You can imagine letting go of one balloon or a whole bouquet of balloons. After a while, with practice, just the act of imagining that balloon floating away will relieve you of the worry.
The next option for learning to let things go is to use a to-do list, but this is a special to-do list. You make a list of the things you want to accomplish that day, but you have a separate category for things that you would like the powers that be to take care of for you. It's a way to symbolically imagine handing off those things you have no control over to whomever or whatever can take care of them for you. Similarly, you can use an idea that comes from Al-Anon, the God box. Now, if God isn't the right word for you, you could always give it a different label. With this tool, you write down the things that are on your mind, and the things that are within your ability to control you work on, but the things you can't do anything about go into the box. Again, this suggests symbolically handing off to the powers that be the things you have no control over. Now, sometimes our worries are valid. Maybe you have a sick family member or you're struggling to get out from under some debt. Now, in this case, this strategy might be the best one for you. Here, we're going to actually schedule worry time. You want to make your worry time a ritual. It should be done at the same time in the same place every day, and definitely not in your bedroom. This conditions your mind that worry doesn't belong in bed with you, and teaches your mind that you will attend to your worries during your scheduled time, which makes it easier to let go of your worries at other times. To ritualize your scheduled worry time, maybe you light a candle, put on music, burn some incense, or pour yourself a cup of tea. You want to mark out to your mind that this is special time. Set an alarm so that your worry time is contained. Don't let it go longer than half an hour. 10 minutes is preferable. And then allow yourself to worry away for the time that you've scheduled. If you prefer, you could spend that time brainstorming solutions, imagining sending love to the situation, or anything else that you would like to do that makes you feel like you're dealing with it. The next strategy that we're going to look at involves observing your thoughts, but without getting caught up in them. Have you ever had the experience of watching clouds in the sky? That's the attitude you want to take with your thoughts. They're there and you're able to observe them, but you don't have to do anything about them, believe them, or try to get them to stop. You just let them float on by. Another strategy for getting worry under control is practicing containment. This strategy is particularly useful for people who are plagued by negative thoughts as they're trying to get to sleep. Here's how this strategy works. Simply bring to mind a container of some type, a box, a Tupperware, a can, doesn't really matter. And then imagine whatever you were thinking about being placed in the container and a lid being put on top of that container. You could even make a note to think about that thing during your scheduled worry time. This is a great strategy to use anytime you need to be focused as well. When you're going to study or focus on work, just imagine putting whatever's on your mind in the container first. The last strategy we're going to look at is just practicing being present. Whenever we're worried about something, we're focused on a potential future. And so the antidote to worry is to practice just being in the present moment. If you're with somebody else, one way to do this is to really focus on what the other person is saying. You can also pay attention to what your senses are picking up. When you are really present and engaged in the moment, there's no space in your mind for worry. I hope this video has given you some useful tools for combating your worry. You know what to do if you like the video, and if I can be of further assistance, you can find me at my website, yourauthenticself.ca. Thanks for tuning in.